First, let's bring in our panel. Heather Hurburt is a former special assistant and speechwriter to President Clinton. And Gordon Jandro is former deputy assistant to President George W. Bush and a former National Security Council spokesman. Gordon, when you heard the speech today, were you thinking, hey, this is a speech that President Bush could not have given?
Well, I think it was a good speech. I think it was a speech that President Obama needed to give. He has a unique opportunity here because of his personal story, his biography, and so people are listening to him in a way that for President George W. Bush, he said many of the same things, similar things over the years, but because he presided over a time where a lot of difficult decisions had to be made, a lot of people thought some of those decisions were not the right ones, and so that made him a little bit less popular. And so people weren't listening to him as closely as they're listening to President Obama. And so he's got a real opportunity here, and the question is, what is the follow-through going to be?
Well, I guess that is one of the questions. Heather, you know, when you take a speech-giving class or whatever, they say, do what you can to identify with your audience. He said, I'm a Christian, but my father was a Muslim. And he talked about hearing the call to prayer and so forth in Indonesia. Is that going to work? Is that kind of identity going to help him and help America with the Muslim world?
John, you know what I think is going to be one of the most important pieces out of this speech is for both Americans and Muslims around the rest of the world to see how Islam fits into American life and how possible it is to come here and live a good life and be a really happy, successful American as a person of Islamic faith, or like President Obama, someone who's not himself Muslim but who grew up being comfortable around Muslims. And that, you know, resets a really important part of the American story, as Gordon said, to get us back to a place where your average Muslim outside the U.S. thinks that the U.S. is on their side. And that's the first big piece of what this speech can accomplish.
Gordon mentioned, Heather, that President Bush was in office at a time when difficult decisions had to be made. I mean, do you think, I mean, do you give him the credit, I guess, for some of those decisions, framing it against the backdrop of what Muslim antipathies came out of it?
Well, you know, one of the reasons that we're in this situation and that President Obama even felt he had to give this speech, of course, is that the Bush administration made a number of decisions that didn't have to be made, first and foremost being to go to war in Iraq, to neglect the Middle East peace process. And that is what really caused Muslim antipathy toward the U.S. to take such a huge jump and make this necessary. So I think I would have a different outlook on that.
Well, that's what I'm wondering about. Gordon, considering the number of, well, let's not go back into past history about the Iraq war votes and so forth. But Gordon, you think that President Bush essentially said many of these same things, that the audience just wasn't hearing them?
I think that's right. He gave a number of speeches over the years. He was the first president to call for a Palestinian state. He talked about the need to respect Islam and all of our shared values in our various cultures. So he said a lot of the similar things, but because of difficult decisions, the Muslim world and many places, the Arab world, tuned that out. They've also, you know, over the years, especially with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, there's a lot of times that people in the Arab and Muslim world use that as an excuse to blame the U.S. for many of their ills, when this is something that we all need to work together on. President Obama made that point today, that Palestinians, Israelis, and the rest of the Arab world, including the Arab League, we all need to work together on it. Can't use any more excuses. That's something President Bush used to say as well.
Yeah, Heather, real quickly, one thing he did say is that he's going to stay personally engaged in the in the Israel-Palestinian peace process. That process has personally swallowed a lot of earlier presidents, including President Clinton, whom you worked for.
That's true. One of the things that I think we're already seeing about President Obama is that he's got a really excellent management style. And with Secretary Clinton, Secretary Gates, General Jones, George Mitchell, I think personal engagement is going to be at a distance he can manage. But of course, the most important thing about all of this is President Obama's now set the table. And as Gordon says, it's about deeds as well as words. So we wait to see what happens next.
Heather Hurburt, Gordon Jandro, thank you both.